of the show, and that is Anharad Evans from who was working on Hpass as a learning and development advisor, and also Cecilia Dinson, who is an advisor at the Reference Center for Psychosocial Support at IFRC. So today we're going to introduce you to what Hpass is and what it is designed to solve in terms of issues in the sphere of humanitarian action. We'll talk about the experience of the Reference Center for Psychosocial Support in piloting the service, and then talk a little bit about what's coming up next and take questions and answers. So if we can move ahead, Margarita, and I think Anharad is dealing with the next slide.
Hello, everybody. Thank you all so much for being here. It's really lovely to have this chance to talk to you today. I just wanted to start off by trying to capture what it is that Hpass is trying to achieve. At Hpass, we're working towards a world where humanitarians benefit from greater access to quality learning and professional recognition. And those two aspects are going to become really crucial as we talk through just some of the parts of Hpass that we think will be particularly interesting to the audience that we've got here today. What Hpass really feels is that humanitarian skills and frontline experience, and that part is very important, should really be recognized in the right way. And Hpass is looking to foster a real recognition of people's learning and skills and experience everywhere, no matter how they were obtained. So for people who have potentially earned a great deal of field experience but haven't got formal qualifications, how do we recognize the really valuable skill set that they've developed? Or if somebody has participated in learning, how are we affording them the recognition that they need for having participated in that? And sort of really trying to acknowledge the very professional nature that exists within the humanitarian sector that perhaps isn't always particularly obvious. And then if we could just move on to the next slide. Thank you. So what this slide tries to capture is what challenges was Hpass trying to address. So one of the key challenges to improving effectiveness of localized humanitarian response is the lack of access to high quality learning and professional development. There is disparity in who and how we can access learning within the humanitarian sector. It's not systematic, it's not the same everywhere and for everybody. So currently there is no platform that standardizes recruitment, professional development, or quality learning within our sector. So that includes, if we look at that green box there are no standards for learning and competency assessments. So there are standards that exist, but they weren't sector specific, they weren't necessarily as usable as they could be. What we found was that there was lots and lots of really great quality offers available, really great learning opportunities, great professional development opportunities, but it wasn't always easy for humanitarians to differentiate which ones were high quality, and it wasn't easy for those providers to differentiate themselves either, or to find ways of really improving and standardizing their offering. Similarly, in that blue box, we're talking about the no standardized approach to professional development. So we as humanitarians don't always have the tools to plan for our long-term professional development. And that's really fueled by that historic emphasis on short-term assignments and emergency deployments. We're so quick to need to respond, we don't always have the time needed to plan our development as well as we need to. And then finally, in that pink box, it talks about the challenge of there being no consistent approach to skills and experience recognition. So this is about the fact that workers and volunteers alike really struggle to demonstrate and evidence their skills and experience. We don't necessarily always aren't able to communicate what we've achieved within our roles in the humanitarian sector. And then organisations sort talent from different pools and therefore apply different criteria when they're selecting applicants, which makes it really hard to have consistency and a standardised approach to humanitarian skill development. And I'll hand over to Don to talk a little bit about how Hpass is addressing some of these challenges.
So Margarita, if you can advance the slide. Thanks very much, and Harriet. So basically, the notion of Hpass is a one-stop shop to meet all three of those challenges. And I'm going to focus on two of the challenges. The first one being the standards for learning and competency assessment. So it's been a long process, but we've developed quality standards for learning and assessment. And along with that, some self-assessment tools and competency frameworks to compare the assessments against. Part of that process is a quality assurance process so that an organization, either a learning and assessment organization, can do a self-evaluation, but also be evaluated by a rigorous third-party body that would look and see that it actually is meeting the standards, and if so, to put a stamp of approval, Hpass approved to that. And along with that, for organizations that need it, coaching services and a community of interest for organizations to improve together. In terms of the consistent approach to skills and experience recognition at the bottom, we've developed a system of digital badge certificates to communicate competencies and assessment against competencies and the quality behind that. So organizations that have gone through the quality assurance process are so-called Hpass approved. So their certificates have a higher stamp of approval, and that actually communicates the competencies and the quality behind it. So I think that's back to you, Harriet, or?
Okay. I probably should have mentioned as well, sorry, that if you would like to ask any questions whilst we're talking, please let Margarita know, and she can interrupt us. That's absolutely fine. You can use that chat function in WebEx to do that. I think I have a tendency to get very excited when I talk about these things, and so I can also talk too quickly. So please do let her know if I am talking too quickly, and I will try to slow down. So as Don mentioned, Hpass is addressing those challenges in a lot of different ways, and some of those are still in development, they're in the pipeline, and some of them have actually now been finalized and are ready for launch, which is really exciting. So over the last 2 years, actually 3 years, because the first year was research, we've been working in a consortium of organizations to develop standards, 2 sets of standards. One set that guides the provision of learning for humanitarians, and one set that guides the assessment of humanitarian competencies. These are designed for learning and assessment providers who are involved in humanitarian action. So it's those organizations and departments where humanitarians go for their learning and assessment needs. We'll have a look at a couple of case studies in a minute, but I just wanted to give you a little bit of insight into how the standards were developed and what they look like, and then we're going to hear a little bit from the Psychosocial Support Centre and their experience of actually piloting those standards. Margarita, is it okay if I share my screen at this point?
Yes, I'm going to give you the right as a presenter, and you can share your screen.
Thank you. So I just wanted to show you where you could actually access these yourselves. So
now you should be able to share your screen. Yeah, excellent.
Okay. Let me know if my share screen has worked.
Yes, we're looking at it.
Excellent. Okay. So the 2 documents that we're talking about are the Humanitarian Learning Standards, for which there is a handbook, and the assessment of humanitarian competencies, and that's a handbook as well. They are, if you go to hpass.org, which we'll put a link on at the end of this, they are available for you to have a look at. I tend to always go to the learning standards because that was my responsibility over the last couple of years. And here you'll see, let's just go to a little bit of detail. So with the humanitarian standards, there are 8 standards. The first 4 really talk about the process of learning. So how we identify and prioritize learning needs that are relevant to the humanitarian sector, through to the design, the delivery and assessment of learning. And then these are the foundational standards that enable a learning provider to provide a really quality service. So the resources that are needed for good learning, the communication, the administration of learning, and the evaluation and accountability of learning provision. And then each standard has got associated key actions. And those are the key actions that an organisation, a learning provider, whether it's a department or whole organisation, must meet in order to have actually achieved these standards. So I'd encourage you at the end of this webinar to have a look at hpass.org and start to have a look around at both the assessment of competency standards and the learning standards as well. They're both up there for you to have a look at. They were developed in a hugely collaborative approach, whereby we started off with a consultation phase, actually asking for input from organisations and individuals involved in humanitarian action, and in particular in humanitarian learning and assessment. So that was there was a regional consultation process where we actually conducted workshops with individuals, semi-structured interviews, focus group discussions, and all of that fed into the creation of the standards. In total, I think we had over 400 organisations from more than 60 countries contributed to the content of the standards. And then in May last year, we launched a pilot phase where we actually had 35 organisations globally piloting and using the standards. And I think that's probably a good time for me to hand over for a little bit of insight into what it was like to pilot them, perhaps.
Yes, I think that was my clue. Next slide, please, Margarita. Hello?
Yes, hold on a second.
So maybe I can just start by introducing myself. So I'm Cecilia. I'm from the IRFC Reference Center for Psychosocial Support. We're based in Copenhagen, but a part of the IRFC, and our mandate is really to support national Red Cross and Red Crescent societies in building their capacity on psychosocial support, both for affected populations, but also for volunteers and staff. And how we got into this whole exciting Hpass adventure was really that we host what we call the Psychosocial Training Institute. So we deliver a lot of trainings, like many other Red Cross, Red Crescent bodies. We deliver a lot of trainings to staff and volunteers. And we've been doing so for the past 10 years or more. So this area of training has really developed quite a lot over the past years. I included a graph just to show how much it's increased, more than almost 150% in the 2-year period. So it's really, we're really experiencing a growing demand for our trainings. And last year we trained more than 600 people across the world. So I think we've been experiencing both this increasing demand for trainings, but then also an increasing demand for sort of professionalization of our training institute. I think this is linked probably both to the fact that mental health and psychosocial support is more on the agenda in humanitarian response, and it's prioritized more now. But I think this professionalization is also a trend in the wider humanitarian sector that we are also feeling. So we increasingly had both organizations who sent people for our trainings, but also um, trainees themselves asking, so what are the, is this formal accredited? We want something more formally, more formal to show our skills that we learn from you. And we had organizations coming back and asking, what does it actually mean when people have taken these trainings? And this is where we were really excited to hear about Hpass, because we've also been, and we are collaborating with universities to have formally accredited courses delivered from in partnership with universities. And I think we will still continue that area of work, but we also realize that that has its own limitations. It's not everything that we do as a IFRC training center that can be packaged into a university, and that would also exclude some participants from taking part, and it might come at a higher cost, etc. So we thought that Hpass was really, so this is how we really got interested in Hpass, that we saw this was a way to get that sort of third body certification stamp, someone saying that this is actually delivered in line with international standards and best practices in our sector. But then again, retaining some freedom to deliver the training in the way that we saw best fit for our audiences. So as Angharad said, we joined the pilot test. We piloted these learning provider standards. So the badges that I'm sure Don will talk about in a minute, we were not able to take part in that pilot. So we focused really on the learning standards. And the process was quite simple. We did like a self-assessment of our organizations in relation to these standards that Angharad just showed. So something is about the whole assessment of how do we assess training needs. Some of it is about the delivery of the training and the setup around the training, and some of it is about our evaluation and accountability. And then after we did our self-assessment, we developed this action plan. So where there were weaker points in our self-assessment, we would have like an action plan on how we could improve it. And then we had the pleasure of having Angharad as a coach, working with us and giving ideas on how we could improve some of it. I would say it was really a positive experience for us. We found the standards really useful. I think when we've tried to work with similar standards before, not tailored to the humanitarian sector, we kind of felt there was too much translation going on. Like, how do we take it from another sector or the formal education sector and bridge it to our world? And we felt that the standards were much more tailored to the work that we are doing. I think also we actually found out, probably one of the best experiences of working with this was that it was really a nice communication tool, because there are always within a team different views of what's best practice, how can we do it, how should we set up, how much should we standardize, etc. And really having that external set of standards saying this is actually something that has been developed in a consultative process with a lot of organization, and this represents best practice in the field, was extremely useful as a communication tool, as a facilitator within our team. I think also one thing that made it quite useful for us was that it was quite easily accessible. So the standards are really short and simple. And we're very much, as humanitarians, used to working in a standard language, or like it resembled in a way all the guidelines and all the ways we're used to working. Like, what are the standards? What are the key actions that we have to make? So it was quite operational in that sense. And I think it was also for us. I think we were quite critical of our own system before we embarked on this self-assessment, and we kind of scored ourselves very lowly, and we're like, no, we're not doing well enough. But actually, we realized through the process and also through our consultations with the Hpass team that actually we weren't maybe as far behind as we thought. There were actually some things that we're doing quite well and that we weren't focusing on so much before. But then of course it could also help us identify the weak points. So we found out that the whole assessment of participants and accountability around that was our weakest area that we could focus on, but actually our whole setup in terms of assessing training needs, organizing trainings, communicating with participants, being transparent, etc. I think that whole setup and the whole design of trainings, the delivery of trainings, that whole system we found out was actually quite strong. So in a way, it kind of improved our organizational self-esteem, you could say, in terms of actually also sketching out what our strongest sides were. Maybe just to finish off, I think, I mean, our main challenge was really resources and time when we embark in a pilot project like this, where there was a limited time period. So I would have loved to invest much more time in it and to embark on the badging as well. But I think we definitely see a future potential in using the Hpass standards and getting the more formal audit and formal third-party approval of the training setup and the learning provision that we're doing. So I think we're really excited to follow Hpass as it develops. And maybe I should just say that a big thank you to the Hpass team and to Don for organizing everything, and to Inherit for all your support to our team. It was really useful, and it has sparked a lot of developments in our team. And I guess I'm happy to take any questions afterwards.
Thank you, Ceci. There are some questions in the chat. I don't know if the panelists can see.
Mm-hmm.
If we can answer them, would be good.
Yeah, I think I can see the one about the difficulty of adhering to standards within emergency conditions. Is that the one that you're referring to, Margarita?
No, there was one that is asking if they need to be from the IFRC team to be able to help in this project.
Oh, I might leave that one for Cecilia.
No, I mean, if it's about the trainings that we deliver, no, we deliver also to participants from national societies. So I would encourage, I can share our website, and you can apply online for our trainings. And then based on the selection criteria, we select participants. So, but our training schedule is online.
Thank you so much. It was really great to actually hear your reflections on the pilot phase as well. There's another question that's come through, which is about the difficulty of applying standards within emergency conditions, which I think is such an interesting question, and one that was really prevalent throughout this project of developing the standards. So there's two things that's probably worth mentioning. The first is that the standards were designed for organisations that are often working in an emergency context. So the idea being that they're set at a level which is attainable within emergency situations. So that includes things like acknowledging that resources are often very limited, that time is often constrained. This is about setting good enough standards for when we're working in really difficult circumstances, and also that these are underlying standards for the development of us as humanitarians on an ongoing basis. So which we're trying to actually ensure that even in a non-emergency situation, when you access training or learning opportunities or assessment of your competencies, that's done in as high a quality a way as possible, so that when you do enter into an emergency situation, you're as prepared and as skilled as you need to be in order to work as effectively as possible within that circumstance. So I hope that answers your question, but please let me know if not. And I just wonder if it's worth at this point mentioning the different tiers that went into actually assessing against these standards, Don, or shall we come to that later in terms of the self-evaluation and then the external accreditation?
Sorry, there's another question before you go into that topic in the chat. They are asking if there any need for cross-cultural training as well, or understanding diversity and inclusion and how it impacts on service deliveries to affected population.
So let me just get the question quickly. Was there any?
And there's another one about what is Hpass the abbreviation of?
Okay, so in answer to that first question, Vanessa, are you happy for me to take it, or do you want to take it?
You can go ahead and I can comment.
Okay. So the standards themselves, there's actually there's 3 underlying principles to the standards. So in addition to setting standards of practice, we've also included an expectation that providers would also implement them in a very principled way. So in that way, they align quite well with the humanitarian principles. And the particular principles that these standards highlight are accessibility, so trying to ensure that learning and assessment opportunities are without barriers. So whether those barriers are caused by location, financial restrictions, language, literacy, numeracy levels, or physical impairments, etc. That there is impartiality, so that people are treated fairly and equally, regardless of cultural or any other circumstances. And that they're inclusive, so that learning and assessment provision should be able to include everybody, regardless of age, sex, gender, marital status, ethnicity, nationality, etc. And so that speaks to that to some extent. But what these standards aren't doing is telling learning or assessment providers what they should be training humanitarians on. The actual subjects that people need access to as humanitarians, that all forms part of an effective learning needs analysis. So as long as they are abiding by that first standard of an effective analysis of learning needs, they should be identifying which topics people are actually being trained on. Hope that helps with that. And I'm going to hand over to Don for the abbreviation of Hpass.
Sorry, can you hear me? Yes, so this initiative originally began under the name of the Humanitarian Passport Initiative. And over time, we realized that the word passport just brought up too many meanings that were not appropriate. So basically, it's just to bring things down to a more convenient size. So H stands for humanitarian, and pass is a similar meaning to passport, but with maybe less inappropriate meanings attached. So humanitarian pass, Hpass, is probably the best rendition I can give you.
Thanks, Don. Shall I hand over to you now?
Sure. Margarita, if you can move forward one slide, that's great. So thanks very much, Cecilia, for that really good talk through of your experience. And we welcome you, once you're ready, to communicate all your work through digital badges, because that is the currency that we're using to communicate all the work that organizations have done and what earners, workers do in terms of developing their skills. So basically, a digital badge is a kind of certificate, and it's a certificate where all the information is contained within it. Strictly speaking, it's an image, it's a PNG file, it's something you can download and have on your computer, or you can share online, but it's interactive. When you click on it, it's like taking a certificate and flipping it over and looking on the back and seeing what is this for, what do you have to do to earn it, how do I know it's real? You can link back to the person who issued it, is there evidence attached to it? In other words, do I know, did a person develop a body of evidence to get this, or did they follow a course? How long is it good for? So it can be a certification for safety, for example. And what standards does it connect to? And the key one for us is the core humanitarian competency framework. So basically, you can, on a very simple level, collect these digital certificates based on perhaps on courses that you take, but also perhaps on field assessments. If you're set up for that, you can be assessed in the field. A qualified person could give you a certificate for that, and you collect these things and you put them on your own account on something called My Hpass. So you collect these things and you use them to demonstrate that you know what you know and can do. And or a learning and assessment organization develops these certificates to show people that they can teach them what they want to know and do to be more effective humanitarians. So it builds trust, and it presents a common message about training that ends up being connected to the things that are important to people, things like competency frameworks, things like standards of delivery of services. So if we can move to the next one. So I'm just going to take you through, this is a sort of a use case or story. Think of Red R UK, it's a learning and a specialist. They can register on this service and learn more about what Hpass has to offer. They can decide to become an Hpass member because they want to issue these digital badge credentials. So they begin to create them based on various courses that they deliver, and they align their credentials. So let's say they make one for travel, safety, and security. They would align it to the core humanitarian competency framework that has an element for safety and security. And then it can decide to think, well, I wonder if what we're delivering matches these learning standards, the humanitarian learning standards. So it can self-assess and start to see whether it does a good job of providing equitable access, whether it does a good job of assessment and setting up the needs. And then it can decide to say, we think we're ready, we would like to be evaluated. And it gets an Hpass quality review, and if once it's successful, any further certificates go out on showing something that says Hpass approved. It's a stamp that goes on the badge itself, and it's within the information inside the badge, so it gets signposted on the system. So their digital certificates are prioritized in the system, in the Hpass system, because they are an Hpass approved institution. So basically, when an employer looks at a Red R badge, from then on it sees, well, okay, I'm looking at 2 safety and security courses, but this one is delivered by an Hpass approved organization. I will prioritize this one because I know it's going to be a quality piece. So if we move on to the next one. So let's think about an employer, and we'll take Save the Children as an example. Save the Children would again register on Hpass, but it decides to register as an Hpass recruiter because it wants to use Hpass to find qualified personnel for its missions. So they would look into the competency frameworks and realize, okay, we want people who align to these types of skills within the core humanitarian competency framework. They can look into the database and find organizations like Red R UK who have developed perhaps that same safety course. And they look at it and they realize that it matches their needs. So they can even go further and they can endorse that certificate and say that this is useful for Save the Children's recruitment purposes, and that actually adds further value to the Red R badge. They can search inside My Hpass and find humanitarians who have earned that Red R badge and use that as a criterion for potential recruitment of those people. In addition, It decides we're developing our research capacity, and we have other needs that we need to train for that are more specific to Save the Children, so it can develop its own certificates. So that's a little badge at the bottom. Its own certificates, perhaps in other areas such as logistics or, as I say, skills that are specific to Save the Children. And then they go further and they encourage their staff to develop their professional profiles and strengthen them with these particular badges, especially ones that are endorsed perhaps by Save the Children as being useful for their mission. So if we can go further. So those are the two sort of ideal use cases I've given you. Here are some examples of badges that have already been developed. And these are pretty much, at least 3 of these are aligned to the core humanitarian competency framework. So the Humanitarian Leadership Academy is offering a lot of courses now on KayaConnect.org that when you complete the course, you are issued a badge. As well, Humanitarian U is on disasterready.org and also, I believe, Kaya, and is starting to badge some of its courses. Bioforce is delivering courses as well on its Moodle and badging some of those courses. And then another pilot participant, World Vision, developed the Disaster Management Foundation's badge. And this is a great example for me. If we can go on to the next slide, I'll show you what's inside this badge. So this badge represents 30+ hours of learning. But the interesting aspect of this is that only 6 of those hours are actually delivered by World Vision. The other hours include Sphere's e-learning module, the reading materials and quiz from Red Cross and Red Crescent Society, the Harvard Humanitarian Initiative, Building a Better Response, and then e-learning modules from CHS as well. And essentially what they're saying is, we think these courses are useful, and we would like you to take those courses, and if you bring evidence to us that you have taken those courses, and then you take our 6-hour course, we will give you this overall certificate that says that you have completed our requirements for disaster management foundations. So it's a really interesting example of recognizing what's being offered by others and not reinventing the wheel. And it's a preview of the vision that we see for Hpass, where perhaps people in the future will come with badges representing Sphere's e-learning module or the Harvard course as well. And it'll be an easier process of gathering those badges together, perhaps adding other requirements and saying this is a complete package of learning. So I think that's my example. I can pass off to Esther at this point.
Before you go, Don, here are some questions in the chat, which I find interesting, some comments about how Hpass will be raising awareness among humanitarians and gaining buy-in from organizations to embed this into our daily ways of working.
Oh, yes.
And also there's another comment about a question, where to find a list of the organizations which have developed Hpass.
Great. So I'll deal with the first question, and that is basically we're developing, we've completed the pilot, and we're basically improving the services and getting it ready for a public launch later this year. And part of that process is developing our communication strategy. A lot of that strategy will be on our website, hpass.org, and social media, but it will also include face-to-face interventions. For example, we did an experimental intervention out at eLearning Africa in Rwanda this past year, and we're looking at other events like that, face-to-face events where humanitarian providers are developed. And a large part of the strategy will be a regional one and leveraging the reach of the organizations that are involved with Hpass for more regional interventions and localized interventions, such as in East Africa and West Africa and other parts of the world. So I hope that answers the question at a fairly high level. in terms of the organizations that are involved in developing, I think I'll hand over to Esther for that, but just to say that that is captured on hpass.org, but Esther can mention some of the organizations that have been involved because she works directly with them.
Yes, so in terms of the 400 organisations that we talked about that were involved in consultations leading up to the development of the standards, I don't think we currently have that list on the website, but I think it would be really interesting to think about putting that up there in future. And then in terms of who's behind HPass, I think it's 7 organisations that we have now that are on the steering committee, and so the Humanitarian Leadership Academy is one of those. As is Redar and Harrod's organisation, and also the IFRC. So there's a number of organisations that are kind of specialists in humanitarian learning, which kind of came up with the idea of HPass and then consulted across the broader sector.
There's also a list of the organisations that piloted the standards in the acknowledgement page of the handbooks as well. So if anybody would like to see that, it's there.
Yes, good point. Okay, and would you mind, Margarita, just moving on to the next slide? Thanks. So this is the HPass website, which was launched last year, so you can go and visit it. It's still in development, so there's lots of work still to be done on it, but I think you'll agree it's looking quite smart already. And if you go on there, you'll be able to access the learning standards and the humanitarian assessment and of competency standards, which Anne-Harrod mentioned. And you'll also be able to see where you can sign up as a member of HPass, so kind of create an individual profile on My HPass and start earning badges from lots of different providers. And you're also able to access a function whereby you can create your own badges, so where organisations can go on there and create their own badges. So all of that's on there already, so I'd encourage you to go and have a look at that now. And then moving on to the next slide, Margarita. So this is just an overview of what we've got planned in 2019. So at the end of last year, we completed our pilot. So this year is really the year where we're working up to launching HPass to a much broader audience. And we've got a little bit of work to do before we get to that point. So hopefully we'll get to that point by the end of this year. But before that, we're just working on updating the HPass website itself. So ensuring that all of the services that we'll be launching are fully functional. And for example, we're doing a lot of work around improving the usability for individual users of HPass. So to enable people to kind of create their profiles and to earn badges on there in as easy a way as possible. So that work's kind of going on over the next couple of months. Then we're hoping to continue working with the organisations that have piloted the platform. So for example, some of them might want to continue their work on the badging. Others might want to continue engaging with the standards if they started some work on that. But we're also looking for around 5 to 10 organisations to work with to achieve what we're calling critical mass on the platform. So we want to kind of generate as much traffic as possible on the platform before we launch it out to a wider audience. So we're looking for organisations to work with that would like to create lots of badges on there, that would like to kind of mobilise their staff and volunteer networks to use the platform. So we'd be really interested to hear from any organisations that would be interested in working with us over the next few months to really get HPass up and running before its wider launch. And then, as mentioned, towards the end of the year, we're hoping to launch HPass more generally, so just to make it open to everyone, and hopefully we'll do a bit more of a kind of a push out to our wider networks then. So there should be a bit more of a kind of a marketing push at that time, and you'll be hearing a little bit more about us. And then the next slide just shows who to contact, Margarita, if you want to hear more about HPass. So there's obviously Don there on the list. And then I'm actually moving on from the Academy soon, but I've put the contacts of two of my colleagues on there. So my colleague Alex and my colleague Shona will be able to let you know more about Hpass going forward. Thanks. So I don't know whether we have any more questions.
There was some in the Q&A I noticed. There was one, I'm having trouble reading it right now, but that was the one that was handled about the unified standards. And then there's a question saying, are the courses free of charge? That's a more complex question. Basically, the learning and assessment providers have different rules. Many of the courses are free, so if you go to kayaconnect.org and take a course on kayaconnect.org, those courses are free. I believe Disaster Ready is similar, but then there are face-to-face courses which may have a cost and you may need authorization to take the course. But if you were, for example, go to kayaconnect.org, you would be able to take courses that are aligned to the CHCF and in many cases earn badges connected to those courses. There was another question I saw somewhere where somebody was having some issues with the website, and I was just checking the functionality. It seems to work, and I think what's happening to this person is when you go to download a document, it asks for your email, and we explain why we want the email. It's not to pester you, but it's basically to keep track of what's happening with the documents. So once you load in your email, then the download button turns green and you'll be able to download the document.
Hello? Hello?
Perhaps while we just wait for any more questions, can I just point out as well that if you as an organisation decide to do a self-evaluation against either of the standards that are up there, so whether you're providing learning opportunities and delivering training or you're assessing competencies of humanitarians, there are lots of tools available to you to help you do that. So Cecilia already mentioned that there's a self-evaluation. So you can use that self-evaluation tool to actually guide you through evaluating your learning or assessment provision. So I think at the moment what we've said is that if you would like access to that is just to email Don at info@hpass.org, but they'll be upon the platform shortly as well.
And maybe if I can just also give a last comment. This is Cecilia speaking, just to say that I've had quite some interest in psychosocial support on the chat, and I've been trying to answer you. But if I haven't been able to answer all of your questions, please visit our website www.pscenter.org, and you can find our contact details there. You can also see more about the trainings that we actually provide and apply online, and also look at our resource center for different tools and guidelines.
So I see there's a question, is Hpass meant for organizations or can it be used and accessed by individuals? Very much so, for both. So if you go to hpass.org and look across the top menu, you'll see for humanitarians and volunteers, and then you'll see for organizations. So you can follow those tracks down and see what you can do depending on whether you're an individual or an organization. Typically, an organization, we would expect at some point to reach out to info@hpass.org, but again, we welcome communication from all.
Here we have another question from the Italian Red Cross. They want to know if the Hpass will work with the IFRC learning platform, and if the national societies can directly become members of Hpass and become providers of badges. So I think Fred Fulton is going to answer.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first question, Patricia, thanks for the question. The first of the two questions, yes, I believe it can be part of the IFRC learning platform, although I defer, of course, to Don and the team. with regards to kind of the technical elements of that. But yes, that is an internal discussion that we're having. I think it'd be very interesting to explore that further with with the Federation and the Red Cross group to see whether that's something that we wish to do. And can national societies directly become members of Hpass and become providers of badges? Yes, I believe that's also possible. Don or the team or the Hpass team, would you like to comment any more on those questions or those comments?
Sure. I can answer the technical question first, and that is that the IFRC is using the Cornerstone on Demand platform. That's my understanding, and that's what Disaster Ready now uses. And there are badges being issued on Disaster Ready, so we could do the same thing on the IFRC program. We've already been in dialogue actually with a couple of national societies, and we would welcome dialogues with other national societies to explore how you might take advantage of this and provide recognition for the courses that you're delivering for the benefit of your learners. We would very much welcome that. So I encourage you to reach out to info@hpass.org, and I'll will respond right away and get a dialogue going with you.
Yeah, thanks, Don. Yeah, perfect. That makes sense. There are a couple more questions. So are the courses on Hpass open to all humanitarians, or is there a limitation to a particular field of work?
I can take that. Basically, it depends on the provider. Hpass enables learning and assessment providers to credential their courses with digital credentials. Beyond that, it's up to the provider. So I was providing that example of IFRC platform, if it joins us, but also KayaConnect.org. A number of providers there are badging their courses, and those courses are free, as is Disaster Ready, as I mentioned. And my understanding is that the limitation is humanitarian action, but beyond that, not much. Actually, I can go beyond that as to say that a number of organizations across other sectors are badging their qualifications, and these could be in logistics, that perhaps a logistics course unrelated to humanitarian skills, but those skills are transferable into humanitarian action. And that is part of the future that we see for these digital badges, is expertise from other areas being applied to humanitarian action. Can IFRC request partner organizations to nominate? Well, that looks like more of an IFRC question.
Okay. Well, I don't think there are more questions. Yeah, we see the question about IFRC request partner organizations to nominate a contact person, but if someone have any questions, just Fred Fulton is the learning coordinator here in the IFRC. You can explore more possibilities with him. And I think we are going to close now this interesting webinar, and I'm going to pass the floor to Fred, who's going to give us some closing remarks.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Margarita, for organizing it, and thank you so much to the Hpass and non-Hpass people who got up in the middle of the night to present and talk and respond to questions, and of course to everyone else who joined and sort of shared thoughts and questions around this important subject. We are part of the steering committee, so we are sort of playing our role also as the IFRC in helping guide Hpass forward, and there is a kind of strong sense certainly that it would be useful and interesting to kind of engage further with it. So as Margarita was saying, we're very much here to and very keen to kind of discuss these matters with our system, with our colleagues in the Red Cross and Crescent National Societies, in greater depth, in the coming weeks and months. So really, thank you again. The colleagues from Hpass have also agreed to make themselves available in the next week or so to further discussions in a WhatsApp group that we have too. So this, I believe this webinar is being recorded. A message will be sent to everybody with the link to the recording and also a link to the WhatsApp group. And in that group we can have further discussions around this, as we have done with previous webinars. So just really to say thank you again to everybody, people who are presenting, the organisers, and all of you who are able to come online, and really look forward to further discussions around this and to the next webinar talk series. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.